Observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Observe and Rapport show. We have made it to episode 10. I'm Kyle Brennan, as always, with my beautiful co-host, Keith Sullivan. Keith, how are we doing?
We're doing good, man. We're doing good. Double digits.
10 episodes. That's huge.
10 episodes.
That is wild. How have we done it?
Listen, 10 is a psychologically satisfying number. The top 10, the 10 best dressed, the 10 most wanted. And the 10th episode, we planned nothing for this. We have nothing planned.
I think we might have had one episode where we planned like a few questions beforehand, but outside of that, which many people may not know, we completely just shoot the shit.
We don't discuss what we're going to discuss. We don't, what have you been reading so I can read the same thing? None of that. We just kind of sit down and go, what's up?
What's been working? Yeah. And, it seems to be doing pretty well.
You told me when we first started this show that a certain percentage of podcasts don't get past their what episode?
Oh, damn it. I always screw up this stat. So I believe it's 90% of podcasts don't make it past 3 episodes. And of that...
3?
Of that 10%...
Why even bother?
Of that 10%, 90% of those don't make it to 20 episodes. So by making it to 21 episodes, you're basically in the top 1% of podcasters in the world.
Oh, so we've only got a few more episodes, and then we're Rogan.
I've heard some people say, like the guy from the Founders Podcast who does like great book reviews, Chris Williamson, who has a great podcast. They basically said, like, don't even look at stats or worry about anything until
I have no clue what's going on.
Until you've done 100 episodes, they're like, don't even ask
exactly
how you should be doing it or what's the right way or how should I be branding and making money. Just like, until you've done 100 episodes, don't even bother. It's funny because a lot of people reach out to me either in my industry or people who want to do something professionally, and they're like, oh, Kyle, like you and Keith do a great podcast. Like, what do I need to do to start a podcast?
And we have no answers.
So, well, I don't. You do almost all.
Yeah, a little on the technical end, maybe.
So at least, like, could you give like a elevator pitch or like a 2-minute spout of what you would say if someone like works in real estate or something, and they want to start a real estate podcast? Like, what tools and things equipment do they need to start a podcast?
It's simple. You can go on Amazon and they sell bundles now for beginning a podcast. They sell you your microphone stand, your cables, your microphone, an interface, which is something you'll learn about if you're actually serious, which is basically just the connection from the audio to your computer. Mm-hmm. And then you need some kind of a digital audio workstation, what they call it, a DAW, if you will. Little acronym. Pro Tools, Logic is very popular as well, Cubase. And from there, you're basically just gathering together some very, very, for the beginning, you would be doing some very basic editing skills. Because people make podcasts now, but they don't know how to use iMovie or Final Cut Pro. They don't know how to use digital audio workspaces. So it's kind of like their stupid earphone microphone audio, and it's just not good enough to get people to care.
That is one thing. So
it's worth just going. I'm not kidding. Like, if you read Audio Production for Dummies, like, that book is real, and I've read it, and I read it in college, but it's full of it's filled with everything you need. Like Shaq was talking about how he started his own business by reading Entrepreneurship for Dummies. Like, it's all in that series of For Dummies, whatever you want to do. So if you just dedicate a week of your intellectual, intake to audio production and basic video, you can start a podcast.
Dude, it's so funny you say that. Like, how many things are there out there that seem really impossible, or you see someone else doing it, and you're like, how the hell did they learn to do that? Mm-hmm. And it's literally so many skills, hobbies, or whatever. It's literally just like dedicate a week.
You just need a week.
Yeah.
Just decide one weekend, I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to go waste money at the bar. And you just dedicate that night to just learning a craft or getting started. I mean, I swear to God, you'll be so much far ahead of so many other people. Just a week.
Yeah, I mean, and the key to so many things like that is, one, doing the work that no one else wants to do, like reading a freaking Audio for Dummies.
Right.
Like, I remember Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Mavericks, on Shark Tank, he created his business by reading the manuals for all of these computational machines, because no one else wanted to do it.
Who the hell's going to read a manual?
And he was in college. He was like, here's a way to make money. Like, no one knows how to work these machines. If I just read the manuals and understand them, I can charge people whatever I want because they have no idea what to do. So it's amazing how much you can get by just reading a little bit more than the average person.
Totally.
You can become an expert pretty quickly. And also, I think the key me and you talk about, which is in light of doing 10 episodes, the key to anything
is persistence.
Is consistency.
Yeah.
And persistence.
Yeah. Ray Kroc, the guy who started McDonald's, said that. He's like, all you got to do is just not give up.
Yeah.
And also not, just to say too about audio production, there's a saying, read the fucking manual in audio engineering and production, because a lot of the issues you do run into, the answer's in the manual.
Yeah.
So just read. Yeah. Read a little. That's why this show is even kind of a thing, because we realized a long time ago the power of just reading a little bit. You gain a lot for some reason, but more than watching a clip or whatever.
I just saw, speaking of clips, I saw a great clip of, do you know David Pakman?
Yeah.
I think he's been on Rogan and that like podcast circuit. He's kind of like a left-wing or liberal pundit, kind of like a Ben Shapiro, but on the other side.
Exactly, yeah.
Really smart, really intelligent guy, but there was a clip of him talking about how much he loves reading and how it gives you so much more perspective
than
anyone else. He's like, if you take a college kid and one of them hasn't read since middle school and the other one reads 30 pages a day, he goes, just imagine the exponential growth of perspective and like insights he can gain, even if he doesn't remember 90% of the shit he's read. He's accumulated just like knowledge over time. And that's what he does, is you can read a 300-page book in 10 days if you do 30 pages a day.
Right.
And like you've gained so much insight on like the human psyche and history and all these different things if you read just like a biography on someone.
Yeah. This actually is a good segue into the book banning that's going on and the reason why that's such a problem.
Did you see
Barack
Obama posted a letter to the librarians of America basically saying like, it's a shame the books that I grew up reading, like Mark Twain and Toni Morrison and all these different people, iconic books basically, are now being censored or banned from elementary schools, from high schools. And he basically sent a letter to the librarians of America to say, you're kind of the last bastion, or you're the on the front lines basically of allowing free speech in the First Amendment to take hold and to allow free expression, free discovery of ideas from the youth.
Yes.
Now, obviously, we're not talking about like pornographic and like ridiculous stuff that kids and violence like kids, I think objectively should not be prone to. But when you get to middle school and high school, I think there's an area of de-nerfing the world and showing them stuff that, like books have, fictional books have rape scenes, history books have terrible atrocities that you need to read up on, because you're not protecting anyone from the truth and the inevitable, difficulties that they're going to encounter in the world and the bad shit that happens. And it comes through books, it comes through people writing down emotions and history.
Like, that's my point. They wrote it down. For you, for everybody. Mm-hmm. And to ban that, to censor that, is, I think that the damage, people underestimate the damage that does. And even if it's books you disagree with, especially if it's books you disagree with, like a lot of the book banning going on in the South is books like, Born Queer, I think is the name of that book. Like, there's these books that are being banned that have to do with homosexuality. Like, there was a book, it's not a fictional book, I forgot the name. I read a list of books that were being banned, and it's not all books like the innocent ones, like Mark Twain novels and stuff like that. Like, some of it is a bit more edgy, but you have to understand that some of these books are about a high schooler's experience coming out of the closet in 10th grade. Mm-hmm. It's like, why ban that book? There are gay teenagers, like, who would benefit from that person's perspective on that situation. Like, and to be so fearful of someone reading that person's insight and forbid somebody from reading that, even if, like, I don't know about you, Kyle, but like, you and I are both cis, white, straight men, right? I mean, like, that's our demographic. And I don't think if I read a book about coming out of the closet when I was in 10th grade, it would have turned me gay. And that's what some of these people are afraid of. It's completely ridiculous. So it's that's the issue, is that once the government gets involved with regulating the educational system, you're opening up a door for people to say, you're spreading misinformation, says me. And so that opens the door for censorship. And once the government censors anything, and it just leads down a horrible path, and that's just as likely on the left and the right. So you have to be careful.
And you hear the classic cliche of like, when are the people who are looking to ban or censor things ever on the good side of history?
Right.
Like
exactly.
And it's also counterintuitive. It's kids, especially teenagers, like kids in middle school and high school. If you tell them they can't do something, like that's the only thing they want to do.
Now I'm definitely going to do it. Exactly.
So like I think it's Theodore's books in Oyster Bay. They actually have a banned book section. And they have it like right in the front. They have like a whole display of like, here are the books that are banned. And like, they have a message of like, this is bullshit. And we want people to be exposed to these ideas because it's important. And I just listened to, I don't remember the guy's name, but he was on the Lex Friedman podcast. He's a free speech absolutist. And
absolutist.
Yeah. And he went to Harvard. He's going for an election to be on the Harvard board to kind of change the way Harvard administrates a lot of their education through, censorship and misinformation and stuff like that. And he is basically on the extreme end of like, you should allow everything to be published. And some things I didn't agree with him on, but he's like, I believe that books like Mein Kampf should be required reading, which I thought was really interesting because it's like, obviously, well, that's a horrible book.
That's so weird. I was just going to say, if you want to read Mein Kampf, you should be allowed.
You should be allowed to read it. And, the fear is like, oh my God, this is going to expose people to
this inspire
Nazi ideology and fascism, etc. But I think if you want to learn about history, like what better way than to actually read the words of one of the worst human beings in history, right?
I have a book called Hitler's Table Talk at the house, and it's just a recording of or documenting of Hitler's random dinner time ramblings about the regime, about the culture, the German culture, the future of Germany. And in that book, you read some of the things. It's not one of those books that you read front to back. It's kind of like while you're taking.
He was not a good writer either.
Exactly. Well, his speaking. His
speeches was.
So this person is writing down what he was saying, not what he was writing. Because he used to go off on these tangents all the time, right? And that was all documented.
He was on speed.
Right, he was on drugs. That's another great book. It's called Blitzed, I believe. It's about...
Sounds like a good title.
Yeah, I only read a little bit of it, but it's about the drug regimen that Hitler was on. It was like, meth as soon as he wakes up, and then like cocaine in the afternoon, and it's fucking nuts. Anyway, so in the book, he says a lot of obviously deplorable things about the Jews and about... minorities in general, but like you read that and you start to see that this guy was not only psychopathic, but sociopathic in the sense that he had no sympathy at all. And he was talking about them as if they were pests and parasites. Like he used a lot of parasitical language like vermin and pest and, he
did that purposely. That was part of their propaganda,
right? And but he believed that, and like you watch someone, and so now that you can identify that at least on paper, you could probably see it in yourself. Maybe when you get older, it's important to know that exists, right? Mm-hmm. Like I read the Satanic Bible once because I was like going through a whole existential thing with like God and Satan and which one and whatever, and I realized when I read the Satanic Bible that, Satan makes a lot of good points, actually. And it's not just about like
we're going to cut that clip.
Right,
that's
right,
gonna be
right. Keith's a Satanist. Yeah. No, but like I wanted to see his side of the story. What am I just going to read what this guy says all day and not ever consider Lucifer and his name means the light, by the way, and like he's a fallen angel after all. He knows the guy. We should see why is he so pissed off?
That reminds me of have you heard the Norm Macdonald joke?
No.
He's like, it's amazing. The more I read of history, the good guys always seem to win.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
They won every time, the good guys, right? Like,
but it makes you think of like, well, all the history and the stories that we've been told have been told by the people who won, which doesn't necessarily mean they were the good guys.
No, history is written by the victors. Like, right? But I read the Satanic Bible, and you realize like Satan's got a lot of good points, and he's pissed off for a very good reason. But also, he's wrong at the end of the day, and for whatever reason. But you should be able to investigate both sides of the argument, I think is the point.
Correct.
You know, and you'll find out that you're actually much more. You get less angry about the issues as well, because you understand where your enemy's coming from. The old expression, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. I think that's more about having inner peace within your own psyche and thought processes about your opinions than it is about being able to get one up on your enemies one day when you come to battle with them or something. I think it's more about, if you understand where they're coming from, it's less frustrating to you for people who disagree with you.
This is the exact same argument I tell people about presidential candidates. I think one of the greatest things in our...
You got to listen to everybody.
In our modern day culture of podcasts, the best thing that's been happening is presidential candidates, who probably will never win, unfortunately, are now going on the podcast circuit. And when you get to hear... you agree with them or not. I was a
socialist after Bernie went on Rogan, dude. I swear to God.
When you hear Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Marianne Williamson, Vivek.
Yeah.
Even if you'll never vote for them or whatever, you get the chance to actually listen to them speak for 3 hours and not be cut off and have, a 30-second soundbite that they have to just like speak in this way and the American people.
Right.
When they're actually having a conversation, you're like, all right, I don't agree with 70% of what he's saying, but I get where he's coming from, or I understand why, based on his background, based on the work he's done in his life,
the providence of his opinion.
Yes, and it's a shame to me that the primary front runners like a Trump or a Biden will probably, or Trump's been on a few podcasts, but he's never going to really open up, or like a Biden. Like, imagine if you had the chance. It might be tough to get through, but if you had the chance to actually listen to Trump and Biden for 3 hours,
can you imagine?
Talk about where they grew up, why they developed the values and belief systems that they have, and just like why they have these thoughts, and actually have an interviewer or someone having a conversation with them that's like, okay, but why do you think that? Or what if that doesn't work out?
Not just trying to trap them in a corner.
Yeah, not just like the host of a CNN network being like, reading a soundbite and being like, well, we caught this video of you and whatever.
Right.
Like, you actually get the chance to develop rational arguments.
No, it's insane. Sides. Like, these days, it's literally like, President Biden, you were seen the other day walking out of a Cat's Deli because the line was too long. Yes or no? Do you hate Jews? And it's like,
Jesus, yeah.
Like, you've put me in this horrible circle now.
And they don't even answer questions.
It's not fair.
They have a press secretary who professionally like wades off any tough questions for them.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're not even actually hearing what the president ever thinks.
You know what's really interesting too, man? Getting into politics a little bit. Robert Kennedy Jr. he just had a congressional hearing about censorship.
Yeah.
And
I saw some clips from that.
Yeah, and it was interesting and it was great, and it's so funny the Democrats were trying to censor him in the censorship,
Yeah.
It was, you couldn't make it up. It was pretty funny, but like the reason I'm bringing that up is because I didn't even know, and this is like sad in a way, I didn't even know that you could watch those hearings. Like, they're live on YouTube.
So apparently I heard somewhere on another podcast that technically those public ones that are filmed are strictly for show and for publicity.
Oh, really?
Like, they're basically, they have...
I'm such a consumer.
I'm sure there is... I'm sure there is value to them, but I think they almost use that as
There's
publicity.
A political point to them.
Like, they're like, okay, we can post these on social media and like do those minute and a half viral things.
They're never going to let us watch the real hearings. Like, will we allow them to eat meat in 5 years? Like, we're never going to see that hearing, right? But like, it's interesting that like, I think there's like one every goddamn 2 days or 3 days, like a very important, interesting topic.
But those are also so valuable because you get to see, like, did you see the one with when they were the representatives were grilling Mark Zuckerberg on
that was
Facebook?
Hilarious. Yeah.
And they were like, how does Facebook make money? It's like, we sell ads, sir. Like, the fact that the people who are leading our country and signing bills to regulate social media, and like, God forbid, regulate AI, and like, they have no idea what they're doing. They're basically just following what they think they should do or what sounds good or what's going to get more money into their coffers to move them on to the next level of government.
Right.
And that's why I think podcasts have been one of the best forms of media that I just can't promote enough. To me, they're the digital form or the audio form of books in this day and age, kind of like the modern day printing press, because you're able to get such a nuanced look and glimpse into people and not rush to conclusions based on, something the Washington Post, like I've never done this before. I commented on The Atlantic had an article about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And you could tell from the minute I opened it, it is just a slam piece.
Yeah.
All it is doing is just telling it he's a conspiracy theorist, he's dangerous. They called him the MAGA Democrat. And then they go, celebrities such as Clueless star Alicia Silverstone are promoting him. And I'm like, that's who you pick to represent.
Is she problematic?
Promoting him. But I'm like, okay, because you're trying to knock him down by saying this dumb
some
Clueless star
actress.
And I literally commented, I'm like, this is such an obvious hit piece that this is.
Well, I think there's no shame anymore, Kyle, in it. I think that no one cares.
And you see it. You see it with all of these emerging independent candidates or ones who actually sound good and sound like they have a good value system, like Tulsi Gabbard and Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders. Whether or not you agree with them, they have great points, and they're not just doing it for the political gain. You can tell they're honest. And then you now are able to see so transparently how the media just tries to take them down and discredit them and smear them with different racist or conspiracy theorist or socialist or whatever it is. They'll do anything and they have no shame.
Yeah. It's sad, man, because it was just so obvious in the congressional hearing we were just talking about with RFK on censorship. At the very end, he just gives this very heartfelt, and he's a Kennedy. His father, and his grandfather too, but his father and uncle especially, were the old school Democratic Party of the working class and the American dream and the affordable grocery store visit and all that great, wonderful, and rights for minorities and all of that stuff. Civil rights movement,
and look what happened to them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's exactly, they right in the head, right? I mean, but he gives this very heartfelt, patriotic speech of the nostalgia for that kind of political discourse where you don't insult your opponent and you just you argue your points until the general cultural consensus is more on your side than the others, and you win the election. It's very diplomatic and it's very democratic and whatever. And it was a beautiful speech. And then the Democratic senator or congresswoman chimes in and just goes, I'd just like to add by unanimous vote an acknowledgement that the Hunter Biden story was just found to have doubts. and everyone's just
okay.
Yeah, without objection. Did you not hear what he just said? Hello?
Yeah.
We need to stop this fighting and this constant my point, and when I said it's shameless, that's what I mean. It's they're yeah, all that bullshit, yeah, whatever. Listen, Hunter Biden never did anything wrong, neither did Joe Biden, right? Right? Yeah. Can we all agree on that? In the middle of this guy's beautiful, movie level scripted speech, it's just so funny. You just have to laugh now.
I know.
The political discourse is so playground. It's not.
I know. And it's a shame the fact that we get to listen to these candidates go on podcasts, and you're just they don't have a chance in hell. Because they're actually making sense.
Right. Exactly. And they're not, it's unfortunate that I think Putin literally said recently that he acknowledged that
By the way, we are getting all the buzzwords right now to get listed on YouTube.
Oh, we're getting
Satan,
thrown off.
Jews, RFK, Putin.
Satan, Jews, RFK, Putin. That's the name of the episode title.
Just keep whispering that into the mic throughout the episode.
Satan, Jews. Dude, that's so funny. But he said something along the lines of I don't trust Joe Biden because he takes his orders from the men in black or something like that. Ooh. Just to sum it up. And so even he's acknowledging that it's just like you said, obvious. There's something obviously pushing this kind of mentality. And I think what it has to do with, bro, is the internet. For the longest time, for 10 years, Twitter was completely unhinged. The internet, Reddit, there was no like, oh, you can't say that. There were no algorithms in place yet to like find hate speech and like delete the comments. So people were just completely going off unhinged on the internet and saying things with zero repercussions, right? And there's data on the fact that psychopaths make up a percentage of any given population in any culture, right? And that usually hovers in a peaceful society between 1% and 3% of the population are psychopathic. Now, it usually doesn't get any higher than that because when psychopaths get out of hand, they get met with physical violence or they get forced to stop. But since the internet's existed, psychopathic people with psychopathic tendencies have been regurgitating all day long, trying to start shit online with zero repercussions. So now there's these bubbles of ideas that exist in the hive mind of our species. And so the psychopathic behavior it's more like 5% now, like as far as discourse is concerned. And that's why I think things are really getting out of hand in the sense that like, you get the sense that it's just an obvious lie a lot of the time when there's a headline. And you wonder a lot, like, what's the point of pushing this idea?
Yeah.
Like, why would anybody want this to happen? At least back in the day, before this technological revolution and communicational revolution, there were consequences for what you said. And now, not so much as a few years ago, but for a long time, there was zero. And those ideas live on and that's why it's hard. Like, you don't know who to punch when you get angry politically or culturally about what's going on, because it's just like this metaphysical idea that's making its way around.
And you don't know if someone's being sarcastic, if they're trolling, if it's actually a real person, if it's like
right, or if it's
a Russian, whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yes, that is the danger of like, what if you just let social media go completely unhindered?
Yeah.
And yeah, I get those arguments 100%. But then also, you see these trends of like declining over time since like the 1950s of declining trust in government, declining trust in religion, declining trust in science, all of these things. And people look at that like, oh my God, like we just have lost all faith in, the experts, so to speak, which to a degree is true. But in my opinion, I think what's the larger cause of that is we're able to get more transparent information. The public, meaning like through Twitter, through social media, you're able to see when you're being lied to and when you're seeing like propaganda bullshit, and you can see through you can separate the wheat from the chaff of like, well, like Biden said this today, but like 3 years ago, he literally said the exact opposite thing.
Right.
And like you can pull that up on social media, and
right?
Like, pull up the clip and
it's right there.
Do things side by side.
Yeah. So the blatant dishonesty.
So you can't just like kind of lie through your teeth anymore. Right. Now there's stamps and receipts, and you can do. Regular people can do hours of research on their own.
The best is there's a compilation of all the politicians who were against gay marriage, and then 4 or 5 years later, be like with the rainbow flag and like as if they've always been on the side of gay marriage. And you also
start to notice how a lot of those stances coincide with some very terrible event happening. Yeah. So it's almost like, oh, don't look over there. Here's a distraction.
Right.
So I think the public is just getting smarter and wiser to the fact of like, oh, don't give us that BS. Like, we know what you're spoon feeding us.
Right.
We get it now.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of...
there's books by Christopher Hitchens about, like what's going on.
And Noam Chomsky at Manufacturing Consent. It's all about this. One of the best books about propaganda in the U.S. that you'll ever read. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's the propaganda issue is, you don't, like you said, like you don't really know what you're watching anymore. Like you have to always be conscious and weary of, am I being manipulated? Mm-hmm. Like every time you look at your phone, every time you look at the TV, like especially the TV, like whenever I see, like you ever notice that, like, for example, the climate change thing right now, it's like, it's really just a beautiful summer, realistically speaking. But everyone's making it like we're dying of like heat stroke outside every day. And again, like, they talk about like an old lady in Arizona died the other day in her own home or whatever because it was too hot. And then they end the broadcast with like, due to human caused climate change. Thank you and back to you. It's like, Yeah, but why are you reiterating that? Like, there's got to be some under-the-table handshake going on in the elite circles of, like, we got to get people to buy electric this, electric that. We've already invested in the stocks. Like, we need those to go up. Because my point is, I had a teacher, Mrs. Labosco, in 4th grade. I hope you're still alive. You were a very nice woman. And she used to go to
Mrs. Labosco.
She used to go to Arizona every year, and she would send all the kids a postcard, and she would go, "Hey Keith, it's summer. I hope you're enjoying your summer. I hope you're doing your summer reading. It's 126 degrees out here in Arizona." And I'm like, it's always been 126 degrees in Arizona for the past fucking forever, and they're making it like it's this new problem. And like, if you just that's another thing about books, man. You buy one book about like the climate. Depends on who it's written by, of course, because you can go on either side of the fence. But like, you just start to realize like the TV, it's broadcasting ideas that aren't the person that's saying them as ideas, and that's why podcasts are so, because it's just the person. There's no influence of a corporate influence or anything.
I also heard a stat, and I'm probably going to mess up the percentage, but it was something like 86% of the content you consume today was created in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
So you're reading or consuming shit that just got made.
Right.
So anyway, what are you reading?
I'm reading a book called Doubting Darwin. Darwin's Doubt, Doubting Darwin. Same thing. It's called Darwin's Doubt by a guy named Stephen C. Myers. He is a developmental biologist and geneticist and modern day philosopher, I guess, because he has this new idea about where we came from. Long story short, I'm listening to the audiobook, but I said I'm reading the book. We'll get into that discussion after this, actually. But his thinking, basically, is that due to the most recent research findings in genetics, it's becoming more obvious that human beings and life in general came from some kind of a creator. Because life and the way it works and the way it develops, especially through the genetics and the genomes and the instructions and the DNA, it's just too fine-tuned for it to be an accident.
Like it's human life or life in general?
Life in general. Basically the thinking is this. It's like, we have A, C, G's, and T's when it comes down to our genetic makeup. And in the computer world, there's zeros and ones. That's the binary digital code, the protein, fundamentals. And for us, we have the A, C, G's, and T's. Now, if you want to create a new life form or a new program in a computer system, I'm going to go back and forth between those two comparisons because it matters. You have to manipulate the code that already exists. If you mess too much with existing code, you will degrade the original function of the code before you create a new one, way before you create a new one. So if that's the case, if it's not so possible to create a brand new code from scratch, then what the hell happened? Because people think that evolution is the answer to where we came from. But that's actually not the case. Whenever a very complicated idea like evolution comes into play, it's too complicated for the average person to understand. So a watered down, kind of like, rounded out edges version of the idea gets pushed into the culture, and now we all think, oh, well, we just evolved from monkeys. Realistically speaking, what Darwin figured out is something called microevolution, where, like Darwin's finches, for example, they have differently shaped beaks than other finches in Europe because of the wind patterns and the weather patterns from the islands. And that all makes sense because the genetics, that process that we learned about in high school is called mutation selection mechanism, or the other way around, mechanism selection mutation, I think it is. And that process is actually very good for manipulating already existing genes, but it does not in any way account for the creation of a brand new gene. So manipulation, sure, but no innovation whatsoever. Microevolution. So the question of where the genetic code came from is not answered. So the more we dig into it, there was a guy named Eric Davidson who worked at Caltech. He was another developmental biologist. He found out about something called developmental gene regulatory systems. So not only do proteins, genes and genomes, really, not only do they hold instructions for what proteins get created, but they also hold instructions to create molecules that will signal for the genome to activate certain parts of itself and deactivate certain parts of itself in the process. So there's a whole other level of complexity with timing now, not just what gets made, but when. So it's getting, as they do more research into genetics, much more complicated than anyone ever thought it would ever be. And they are realizing in this system that if you even mess with it just a little bit, the thermodynamic structure of the proteins that will make up the enzymes in something's intestines or whatever will be completely thrown off. And now nothing, and then the developmental process of that animal will just shut down.
Wow.
So put it this way, there's developmental regulatory gene system A, right? And you're trying to make a brand new one. You can mess with those genetics and try to create a new code for animal B, but you will, before, I think it's like you're allowed between 5 and 15 mutations before you completely compromise the entire thing. And then everything just goes to shit because it's such a finely tuned system. Now, electrical engineers know this to be true because there's a principle that says the more integrated a system is, the more likely it is that if you make a change, it will completely fuck everything up. It's
basically sounding like the Matrix is real.
Yeah, and it's like, it kind of is, right? Because first of all, you can't prove that the Matrix is or isn't real. You know, you really can't prove it, right? So, and I guess his point is that, you know, we don't find, in our experience as a human being, finely tuned things in nature, where if you just if you just toy with it a little bit, it goes to shit. We've only seen that in human created things. So the guy Eric Davison I was talking about, he realized when he was mapping out this system and its process, he realized this looks exactly like an integrated circuit for like a computer or a car or something that is complicated that runs on multiple things working together. It's not like anything you can find anywhere else. It's just a genetics thing, DNA thing. And, you know, since that's the case, it's almost, so the guy who wrote this book, Stephen Myers, his argument is that it's really the best explanation for where we came from. Because, you know, people always say, well, over time, anything can happen. But his thing is like, time's always the hero of a faulty plot. Like anytime there's a hole in a plot, they just go, a million years later, this happened. Right, and now everything comes together. It's like, he's like, yeah, but the neo-Darwinist theories don't have any explanation for the chemical evolution that they always talk about, for example, where like there was just a bunch of molecules in a soup in a volcano that just randomly decided to start coming together and creating these super complex, finely tuned systems. He's like, that kind of planning, if you want to call it that, it doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's an interesting book on like, the more they dig into the science, the more it leads to like a theistic kind of, or a theology kind of like way of explaining things. And real quick, I just want to point out, and he makes this point in the book, Isaac Newton, Robert Boyle, like all those old school scientists who were the pioneers of the scientific revolution, they thought that there were secrets in nature. Like there's an intelligibility in nature where it's almost like only we could really figure this shit out. Like intelligibility, evolutionarily speaking, most animals don't have that. They interact with their environment, but we manipulate and understand and try and figure out the genesis of things.
Yeah.
Like the idea of the creator being like us being in his image, it gets a little religious in the book. It's like as if we were created to interpret the world that we occupy.
Well, we're the only species that creates stories to try to explain why we're here,
right?
Why we got here, and we're also the only species that's really able to investigate deeply.
Yeah.
In that. So it's weird as you were describing that. It almost reminds me of like AI becoming conscious, of like understanding like that. Like ooh,
right? Like
imagine an AI if it was took on a persona, starting to unravel. Like wait, did someone create me?
Right.
Like, how did I get here?
Right.
And it's almost like we're doing that ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, too, because Darwin Darwin had these theories, like 150 years ago or so, and that was seen as like heresy at the time.
Exactly.
And then now it's kind of just widely adopted as like, okay, yeah, that's the truth at this point. And now this comes along, and it's just like, well, not so fast.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
So people confuse the gene manipulation evolution with the genesis of evolution. Like,
it reminds me of like going through, have you ever done like have you ever tried to code? Like
no,
a website like JavaScript or something.
No,
it's almost like that. It's like,
yeah, well,
you type out all this code,
like,
and if there's an error, you have to go line by line and be like, well, where did I miss a parentheses or something?
When they mapped this out at Caltech, they're looking at it, they're like, this is an integrated circuit. This is so odd. Like, this is like, it was as if something engineered this.
Wow.
It's very...
That's cool.
It's really interesting, and it's like, how do we know, man?
Yeah.
We don't know. You ever see Prometheus?
I haven't seen that.
The movie Prometheus is fantastic.
Who's in that one?
There's a guy who looks exactly like Tom Hardy who's in it. Idris Elba is the captain. Charlize Theron is the captain. Excuse me. Idris Elba is the driver or whatever. Maybe he's the captain. She's the commander. I don't know. Whatever. It's an Alien prequel. It's actually about how Alien came to be.
Oh.
But what we found out in that movie, spoiler alert, is that we were engineered by these things that we call the engineers, who were these aliens that, just because I guess they could, decided to create life and put us on Earth and just see what would happen, I guess, kind of thing, or whatever. And I guess the point of that movie is that, like, it was an arbitrary decision. Like, there actually was no meaning behind. They were like, well, because we could. It's like the Stephen King novel Under the Dome, when at the end you kind of realize, like, the dome came from these aliens in the sky that weren't trying to do anything profound or meaningful. They were playing in like a sandbox, and just threw a lid on top of this one town for no reason. Like,
I think about that all the time.
You know what I mean? Like,
when you
why
see,
does it have to mean anything?
Yeah, like when
right?
you see
like,
when you see ants building like a sandhill, and then like you kick it, or like you put a cup over it. Like, is that basically what we're experiencing?
I think that's the inspiration for Under the Dome, and that's the big scary thing with AI, is that, you know, there are people out there who believe that it will be a similar situation where, think about when you're that much smarter than anything, you know, or you have so much more of an interpretation of the universe. Like, you don't even think twice about killing an ant. You wouldn't even think twice about knocking over an anthill, right? Like, and if AI gets that level of intelligence and, you know, intelligible capability, it might just wipe us out just because it's fun.
Yeah.
Not even because it's a threat.
I've listened to like back to back podcasts about AI, and I'm like tapped out.
I don't give a shit anyway, to be honest. Like, if that happens, it's like, what are we going to do anyway?
It feels like we're discussing computers and like what computers will do to society in like 1969 right now. It's like, it's too early.
I think the difference because, like, yes, people said the same thing about, like, I've talked to other people about the internet discussion we had before about the discourse being completely unregulated and there being no consequences for what you say. People always say, yeah, but, you know, they said the same thing about, you know, television, when television came out, that it's going to ruin this culture and all the kids are going to become lazy. But I think the difference is that television isn't addictive, you know, and I mean, it can be.
Well, yeah.
But I can turn off the TV. I've always been able to turn off. I can't put my phone down, dude. You know what I mean?
And I mean, in 5-10 years, the average human will probably not be able to live. They can be able to live, but the average human will not live without AI in their life in some way.
No, I agree with you.
And it'll be, I mean, again, I don't want to talk about it too much so we can change subjects, because I've talked about it so much recently. I mean, there's so many pros. I mean, the easy way to sum it up is it's like fire, right? Like, you can use it to warm your house, or you can use it to burn down a village. Mm-hmm. And AI has a lot more capability to burn down a village, and that's why everyone's so fearful. But I mean, it's going to have a hell of a lot of amazing resources and benefits to society, I think.
Do you think if someone says they're reading a book, but they really just listen to it on audio, that they read the book?
I think yes, you can technically say that you read that book, but it's cheating a little bit. It's different. It's not like, if someone says they like, oh, I read that book, well, actually, I'll listen to it. I'm like, I don't care. Like, you still consumed it.
Sure.
But it is totally different. It's like if I said, you know, I listen to 3-hour podcasts, right? You can listen to that while you're washing the dishes, working out, whatever. But if I told you, hey, read the transcript of this podcast. That's very different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you're
Totally.
gonna
I wouldn't want to.
You can consume it in two different ways, but I think those two ways are very different.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I find it very easy to listen to a conversation, like a podcast, because it's kind of passive. It's background noise. You can follow along. You can tune out
while you're exercising.
When you're reading a book, you tune out. You missed a lot, and you kind of need to go back and recheck.
That's my big difference, is that it's just a personal difference. Like I know that I digest and process the information much more cleanly and absolutely when I read as opposed to when I listen to it. I listen to audiobooks as a necessity if I don't want to wait for the book to come to my house, whatever. I don't think you have the right to say you read the book though. Because I don't think so. Because I've listened to, I've even said on this show, I read, but I really listened to it. And I didn't mean to get one up on people or to deceive. It's just that it's easier to say in passing. So I understand people saying, I read this book. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But the experience is no doubt different. Yeah. So I don't think it's valid to say you read something if you didn't read it.
And I also think the big difference, at least in the way that I consume books, is I highlight a lot.
You do highlight a lot.
So I'll highlight, and the difference between a book and a audiobook is if I want to go back to a book that I highlighted, I can go back and be like, oh, here are the 20 quotes that I highlighted that really made the biggest impact on me. I can put that into my notes. I can put it in my notebook. With an audiobook, you don't really get... I think you can do that, but true. It's not really the same effect.
It's your responsibility now. You have to write it, you have to pause it and write it in your notes kind of thing.
But you're not gonna ingrain as much information, I don't think.
I've never listened to an audiobook and it became one of my favorite books.
And
do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And of the audiobooks that I've loved, where I'm that was such a good book, I've actually bought the hard copy to be it was so good that I need to read the actual book to get it deeper.
What was that one for me? I just had one like that.
I read, for me, it was Why We Sleep, the Matthew Walker
book.
Okay.
What's that about?
Literally Why We Sleep.
Oh.
And it's the biggest, it's probably the most modern tome on sleep and how important it is. And it's amazing.
Kyle, can you explain that though? Because honestly, dude, I don't get a lot of it. I really don't. I mean, I do, but am I gonna die soon? I feel like most people get 7 to 8 hours a night. I don't get that, bro.
7 to 9 is the most recommended. So basically, what Dr. Matthew Walker.
What am I missing out on here?
A lot. So sleep. I mean, if you hear a lot of Dr. Peter Attia says this, the two biggest, I guess, superhuman or super drugs that if you could put them in a pill, it is, number one, it's 8 hours of consistent sleep. Same go to bed and wake up schedule. Mm-hmm. That is you're healing your body, you're recovering, you're digesting information that you downloaded throughout the day. You're, just basically giving your body the reboot that it needs. So sleep, 8 hours, 7 to 9 hours ideally of sleep. Consistent quality sleep too, in a cold room, with minimal light, minimal screen exposure beforehand. That and exercise, those two things alone. You gotta
exercise, dude. You gotta exercise.
But it's almost if you had the choice between a shitty exercise but you'd only have 5 hours of sleep, it's skip the exercise, get 8 hours of sleep. It's almost it's that much more beneficial to you. And one of the most interesting stats that he talked about was daylight savings. Daylight savings, what is it? Whatever the time when you lose an hour. So what is that? In the fall, car accidents and cardiac arrests rise by 20 to 50% because people have less sleep. So people are more stressed, people are more drowsy. And the reverse happens when you gain an hour. Is car accidents go down.
Look at that.
He's like daylight savings is the most natural human study on the benefits of sleep.
Right. It's almost like a researcher would have loved to be man, if only we could just take an hour away
one day
to see what happens. You know, statisticians would be we got to get all the data.
That's a book I recommend to everyone because now I mean, I've always been pretty diligent about my sleep, but now I really like I can be a loser. Like I'll go to bed at like 9 o'clock.
Dude, now that we're getting on now and all that, like I wake up from a 9-hour like conscious voluntary decision to go to bed early. I wake up in the morning like I am so happy that I did that.
Yeah.
Like the feeling of just waking up, and you wake up before your alarm when you do that. You wake up, you go, oh, I got some time. I'll make a coffee maybe.
Yeah, and he also...
do you ever... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, he also talks about what alcohol and caffeine and marijuana do to your sleep, and that's made me really cut back on a lot of those. Like, I think what
is the big alcohol? My wife can't sleep when she drinks. I can sleep like a
I might screw
baby.
up this stat too. I think it's for every drink you consume, you lose 2 hours of quality sleep, basically.
So I haven't had a quality sleep in my entire life.
It's like if you have 9 drinks, you're basically... and actually, when you are drunk and go to sleep, you're not sleeping. You're unconscious. It's different. So you're not...
Is that why you wake up like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and you're not entering REM sleep, actually. So you're literally just you're knocking yourself unconscious.
So getting drunk, I don't even know... that is never the reason why I drink.
Yeah.
I drink because I think it's fun to drink with people. That's fun.
Agreed.
It's socially fun. But the being drunk part has nothing to do with...
Once I hit,
once
I hit that like 3 to 4 drink threshold where you're about to tip over into like, tipsy drunk, that's when I'm like, fuck. Like now I dread it.
Right.
Because I'm like, that's going to...
3 drinks in is perfect. Like that's when you feel the anxiety relieving effects of alcohol.
Yeah, and you start, you get that lubrication.
Yeah,
you start talking.
Some oil on the hinges.
Getting a little more honest. Yeah.
Yeah, you get a little more honest. Yes, exactly. It's a truth serum like that.
Yeah.
Speaking of statistics, I wanted to bring up a statistic I saw today. It was fucking hilarious. Each year, there are more reported cases of New Yorkers biting people than there are sharks biting people. Because it's Shark Week, I guess, was the statistic. And I was like, that is hilarious. And then I looked up the stats, and it's even funnier is that the difference is not even comparable. It's not even close. Like, I think it's 15 or 1,584 reportings a year, or in like the 80s. It was like 1981. They just chose a random year. And globally, there was 54 shark bites. So
dude,
sharks never bite people.
Sharks do not bite people very often.
Yeah.
I think there's like 5 shark deaths or deaths from shark bites a year.
Right.
Which is way lower than I would have guessed.
Exactly. And that's specifically New Yorkers. Like I understand that New York is a very densely populated place, but like it's just interesting to know because I go to New York City every day. Like I'm more likely, like 20 times more likely to get bitten in Penn Station than I am at any beach in the world.
That's definitely true.
That's so stupid.
I came pretty close the other day, actually, now that I think of it.
Yeah. Oh, I've been physically assaulted by homeless people. It happens. Yeah, I don't know why anyone wants to go to that city. It's the worst city I've ever been to in my entire life, New York City.
There's worse.
I'm sure there are. But like, God, man, I mean, the right angles, the piss, there's just nothing about it for me anymore. I mean, I guess if you live there, there's an aesthetic because it's like your neighborhood is the coolest, most happening city. But like, I don't get the allure. I just don't get it.
I think living there I
feel bad for tourists
living
when
there
I see them. I'm like, I'm sorry you're here.
Yeah, living there when you're single in your young 20s is maybe one of the greatest things ever. Just because the access you have. Like when you live in New York City, within not even a mile radius, within like a 5-block radius, you have everything you could possibly need. You literally have like 6 restaurants, like a pizza joint, an Asian joint, a Mexican restaurant, 4 bars, 2 dive bars, 2 clubs. You have a post office, a church, a school.
Dude. Like when I was single, I'd be at someone's apartment and wake up the next day, whatever, and like I'd see outside their window there would be like an outdoor sitting area Italian restaurant, and it's right downstairs, and like I'd go there and get like an espresso and like a croissant or some shit, and I'm like, I get it now.
To me, the best part of it was the accessibility.
That's what I'm saying.
Being able to walk everywhere, like now.
And then you can go to the Met.
Yeah.
Right after, if you want.
And now when
you
I
know?
want to go to grab a coffee and a croissant, I have to get in my car and drive. And it's just not the same as literally walking. And like sometimes you walk past your normal coffee shop and you go, you know what, I'm going to walk 10 more blocks.
Right.
Now you discovered a new one. And you're like, that was cool. I didn't know that was here.
See, I just get the commuter dose of the city. It's not even close to
when
the
you're doing the
reality.
same thing every day, like I do too. No, but speaking of like crazy cities, I just read Scar Tissue by Anthony Kiedis from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes.
Wild book.
I actually read it a long time ago. I think it
came out in like 2004.
Yeah, I was like 15 when I picked it up.
Yeah, I remember I wanted to read it when I was 15. I remember seeing it in a Sag Harbor bookstore. And I was like, I want to read that. It looks really cool because I love the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I don't know why I waited so long because so many people recommended it to me. It's like a great biography.
No, he lost his virginity to his dad's girlfriend.
Dude, it's a wild story.
When he was like 11,
I mean,
or something.
It's a great book, but like, my coworker joked with me. He was like, the synopsis of this book is, I did heroin when I was 13. I got sober. I relapsed. I got sober. I relapsed. And I made a rock and roll band. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much.
What do you think about Anthony Kiedis in the sense that I guess I'm a Chili Peppers fan. I don't love them very much. Wasn't his involvement in the band just like, we need a singer and you don't play any instruments? So
well, basically he listened to, what's the song? Grandmaster Flash? What's that song? It was one of the first hip hop songs.
Well, he is definitely a hip hop influenced frontman.
Is it it makes me wonder sometimes?
Boop, she's just a little DJ.
Yeah. Like what's the song? It's
I don't know.
It makes me wonder sometimes when I think I'm going under.
I have no clue. I'm sorry.
Shit. You know, the people listening are probably going nuts, but that song came out in like the early 80s, and him and Flea were best friends in high school. And then Halal, who I think his name's Hillel, was the guitar player, and like Flea was in a band, Hillel was in a band, and like they would jam together. And yeah, basically one night at a club, they were up on stage, and someone was just like, "Oh, let Anthony sing." And I guess Anthony Kiedis had been listening to that rap song, and he realized like, "Oh, you don't actually have to be a good singer to be a singer. Like you can just like." Talk.
Like Zach De La Rocha from Rage.
You can talk and just like rhyme words and tell a story, and like that's good. So that's literally what he did. And dude, you forget that they've been around for like 45 years, and they didn't really make it big or like have hits until 1991. Mm-hmm. So for their first
decade of nothing,
for their first 10 years, dude, I listened to their albums, like all of them. They were bad.
Talk about persistence.
Not bad, but like it was definitely a new and unique form.
When was Give It Away? 89, right?
Give It Away was 89, I believe. And then
that's when they started to get good.
91 was Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, which was like their big album. Under the Bridge and Scar Tissue and those
This
songs.
is reminding me of there's a lot of AI covers now on YouTube that you can listen to. And I listened to one. I mean, I it's reminding me because there's a lot of Kurt Cobain ones, especially because he had just this very artistic individual, you can't fake it kind of angst in his voice, right? So people replicate it a lot, and a lot of the covers are like Red Hot Chili Pepper songs, like Kurt Cobain sings Californication. And if you remember, when I came in, I was singing Kiss from a Rose, remember? Mm-hmm. Dude, there's a cover of Kurt Cobain singing, but it's not the original music. It's like an acoustic version, so it's just like the unplugged Nirvana, but Kiss. That. But dude, I'm not kidding. And people say you can't digitize. You can't create an organic response from a digital thing. I don't know. It's getting so good now that this AI representation of Kurt Cobain singing, dude, it's so poetic in that because he committed suicide and like, he had the love interest in his life and whatever, and like, he's kind of like he invented that aesthetic of the depressed, soft guy on the stool with a guitar and a raggedy shirt on, like, and to hear him sing like a grungy kind of like acoustic raw version of that song, bro, it's great. And I know it's not real.
I know, but I love it.
Great.
Well, that just happened with like a Drake song, like a Drake AI song,
completely made up. Yeah,
was like one of the top streaming songs on the internet. And it's kind of a shame because that music, if it's good, if like the AI or the person who inputs it to the AI, knows how to curate, right? Like, Kurt Cobain's aesthetic with these lyrics is like Johnny Cash and
Dude,
Hurt,
there's so many Johnny Cash ones. There's so many of Johnny Cash.
It's a shame because like the songs are going to be just like indisputably good, right?
Yes.
Whether it was created by AI or not, if the match is right and it's true to the lyrics, it's beautiful. But then there's going to always be that kind of dreaded side conversation of like, well, this is illegal and who gets the rights to the song. Right. It kind of stinks. But, I love on Instagram, like guys who do, those covers of like, what if Blink-182 sang this country song? And it's always like awesome. Yeah. And I love that. It's really cool.
Yeah. They have one of Johnny Cash doing Everlong. And it makes sense because, it's like, it's like if anything could ever be this real forever.
Oh yeah,
and it's just and it's just an acoustic version. It's not like with the Taylor Hawkins crazy drumming or anything. But when you find the right, can you imagine if he ever, and you can imagine like if Kurt never killed himself and just maybe went to therapy or whatever. I don't want to sound ridiculous, but like got through it. He would probably be a guy who would come out with a acoustic cover album, and maybe he would cover "Kiss from a Rose." So like, I hope it just remains fun and no one gets in any legal like Napster Lars Ulrich bullshit trying to forbid it from happening. Like, dude, we're just having fun.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen. But
Scar Tissue is
great book. Yeah. Great book. Really cool insight into the life of a rock and roller and also an addict too. So it's a good book just about addiction and like the vicious cycle. How when you get chemically hooked on something, it takes over your life. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why, by the way, real quick, addiction, I just want to let people, you got to listen to Soft White Underbelly.
Oh, man.
I mean, you just got to, I brought it up on the show before, but we talked about how podcasts are popular because it's just a person talking, and people for the longest time thought that a person talking isn't interesting, but it turns out that everyone, any asshole on the street, whether he's the president of the United States or he's a homeless drug addict, if you just let them talk, you will be interested in what they're saying because people are fascinating. Yeah. Their stories. Our understanding of the world is based on stories. That's why we like movies. That's why the Bible and like all these books. Like it's we even if you watch a movie and go through it and you don't necessarily talk about the movie after you leave, that doesn't mean you didn't learn anything from the movie. Your brain, there's like multiple people in you. We've talked Jungian shit like that. And part of you is digesting that story, whether you know that you're doing it or not, or whether you think you understood it or not. And like, that's why stories are important and we'll never, it's like a fire. We'll always stare at it. We'll always stare at a fire. It's where we come from, And that's and what happened around fires, stories, orators. Like it's what we are.
Yeah, everything we do is a story, pretty much.
And we understand the world through stories.
Yep.
It's a good way to wrap it up.
Send it on that.
Let's do it.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in to the Observe and Report Show, episode 10.
Thanks for sticking around for 10 episodes. We'll see you next time, and hopefully we get past that 21st episode statistic.
Amen.
All right.
See you, bro.
Good night.